Welcome everyone to the Berklee Global Career Summit. My name is McKinley and I will be moderating this very first panel that we're having. It's called Make a Splash, Jumping into the Industry with Intent. So we're going to be talking about how you can make an impact in your first few years, investing in your career, creating value for yourself, and I'm going to ask each of our guest speakers on the stage here, what led up to the first big shift, the tipping point in their careers. So first I'd like to start just by having each one of you introduce yourself, and can you give us just a short description of what it is that you're currently doing? Can we start on the end right here?
Good afternoon, good morning everyone. My name is Mihago, that's my stage name. Let's call me Alan today. I'm a music producer and composer, former singer I should say, and a guitarist.
Thank you.
Morning everybody, my name's Iain Hill. I work at Live Nation Barcelona, the Barcelona office of Live Nation Spain, as a promoter. So I'm directly involved in contracting artists and putting on shows, right from club shows through to stadium shows, and also some festivals as well.
Thank you, Iain.
Hi, my name is Chrissy Tignor. I am a faculty member at Berklee Boston in the Contemporary Writing Production Department, as well as an instructor for Berklee Online. And right now I do that, as well as I have a project called Audio Upcycle, where I built a recording studio out of donated equipment in the Dominican Republic. So that's what I'm working on now.
Thank you, Chrissy.
Good morning, Berklee. Make some noise for yourselves. It's great to be here. My name is Sanj Surati. I'm an innovation consultant. I started in the music sector as a rock singer. I used to be in a punk band. I used to play all over Europe. This was like 20 years ago. And my dream was to get a record deal. And none of the record companies would touch us. I thought it was because we were crap, but I think it's just they didn't really understand us. I started in the music sector when the digital space was very new, and I started to kind of build things like websites, and what I learned was that the human behavior was changing, and from that I basically managed to do lots of things within the music sector with regards to innovation and new platforms. And now I run an innovation agency that helps businesses or music artists engage with consumers in new and exciting ways using emerging technology.
Thank you so much, Sanj. So I want to start by focusing on that first topic of how we can make an impact in those first few years in the industry. And I'm going to kind of take a moment to dive into everybody's first few years here on the stage. But first, I would like to start back with Sanj, and I would like to ask you, what were the first few professional roles that you took on after graduation, and how would you say that you made yourself a key player within those companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started in the music sector, things were very different. The landscape was very different. Like the way people engaged with music was completely different. You had to walk to somewhere, you had to spend a lot of money, and then you had to go back with this physical product, and then consume the experience. And now things are like completely different. You just open up your phone, you open up an app, and you're connecting to music or a music world. And what I learned when I started was the industry, I'm sure it's like this in all industries, but the music industry specifically was very difficult to get into. If you were a nobody, you couldn't really connect with anyone. I mean, you could network them, but you really had to kind of prove yourself. And luckily for me, I saw that the digital space was changing the way humans behave. And I looked at that and I thought, you know what, if I want to make an impact within the music space, I have to be innovative and innovate in that industry. So I started working with lots of different technologies. So initially, I started working with social media when social media was called the internet. And a lot of record companies didn't really understand what the internet was. So you'd go to, you know, MTV or Sony, and they'd have like one digital person who'd be trying to fight for budget to build a website, because the industry didn't really understand that the digital world was going to change everything. So I would go in there and say, right, okay, I can build that for you. And to be honest, I didn't really know much about the digital space. I just kind of blagged it. You know, I had an idea of where things were changing. And once we started to get the gigs, we started to build that. And so I did that for a long time. Then started working with different types of technology, so RFID ticketing for the live music space, digital aggregation for the digital download space. And where I struck gold, I started working with this company that started doing holograms in the music space. They'd just done something with Madonna and the Gorillaz, and they wanted a head of music to kind of help them develop relationships with the music industry. And then we worked with loads of different artists. My first big client was Universal Music. Worked with the Black Eyed Peas, Mariah Carey. But where things really changed for me was when we started to bring people back from the dead. And one of those artists was Tupac, and we did a hologram of Tupac at Coachella, which made me, or changed my kind of placement in the music sector from being a nobody into being everybody. And I think, and you know, I've talked to you guys here, I think where you can succeed when you're starting off within the music sector is you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to kind of look at the landscape and see where you fit in that landscape and then build from that. And that's not to say you've got to look for the next Tupac hologram, because there's only one Tupac hologram. But there are other things that, you know, need to change within the music industry, or there are other opportunities that aren't being seized upon in the music industry. And I think that's where I managed to succeed. Because when I left university, it was a very dark place. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes. And I think it's a really central theme. You know, we have to pay attention to change over time, because would you agree that in order to remain valuable and make an impact, that we need to know what's changing around us and what's going on? I know that we were talking a little bit about change over time and what may have been a valuable aspect of a person 20 years ago is maybe different now. Do you have anything to add about that?
Well, yes. I mean, I think that's a very valid point. You have to know where you sit in the industry and what you can offer to the people. Even if you're working to yourself, what you can offer to your clients. If you're working for a company, what you're offering that particular company, what experience it is. I mean, now, working as a promoter, I started as a tour manager stroke promoter, and I've ended up as being a promoter, and but I'm offering something completely different now to the artists that we promote. Than I was at the beginning of my career. At the beginning of my career, I was working with artists who were looking to break through, and really looking to break through a particular club scene, which I enjoyed and I knew about because I used to like going out and I used to like the music in it. Now, I could no more do that than ride a horse backwards. I mean, I don't, you know, I go out, but I'm not at the center of what's going on in the club scene at all. But my experience allows me to, you know how to stage a concert, know how to put an event on, know how to market it, know how to negotiate, know how to deal with things that come up and problems that come up. So you're doing the same job, but you're doing it from a completely different perspective and with a different eye. but I know what I offer my company. I know what I offer my clients. That's basically it.
And I want to jump a little bit off of that idea of knowing yourself and knowing what you offer with another question for Sanj, and then I'll open up to everyone else. You have a very clear idea and message about how technology permeates our culture, and I think it creates this sort of brand for you. How does that help you when having your own personal brand and knowing very much what you're doing and your purpose? How does that help you when it comes to taking on new clients or communicating throughout different projects?
I think it's a very, very broad question, because having a brand is great. You are a brand, you are a thing that people look at and go, wow, that's interesting, or that connects with me, that inspires me. But before you have a brand, you have to be able to do whatever it is that you do, your job, your role, to the best of your ability. And Iain touched on it earlier. He knows what he does, and he does them well, and that's the reason why people work with him. I'm sorry to talk about you in the third person. So for me, I've been working with lots of different technologies, but the holographic space is something I'm known for because of the 2-pack hologram. Just to give you guys a bit of perspective, before I worked on the 2-pack hologram, there was about maybe 3 companies in the world that did holograms. Since 2-pack, there's hundreds of them. There's hundreds of holographic companies, and all of them are fighting for dominance within that space, the holographic space. But a lot of clients come to me because of my narrative, because of the 2-pack hologram, because of some of the shows I've done, and that means my brand is in a different place, and that narrative allows me to communicate that on different levels, whether it's Instagram, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's a conference like this where I'm on stage talking to people. I think before you develop a brand, you have to define yourself, and that definition can come from what you've done, or what you do, or how you want to get to somewhere. A prime example of that, when we're talking about brands, of a difference of the reason where a narrative is stronger than the actual brand. When David Beckham launched his Instagram page, he got 40 million followers in a couple of days. Now, I'll bet my career, anyone in this room who sets up their Instagram page tomorrow is not going to get 40 million followers in a couple of days. I might be wrong. And the reason for that is his narrative. And I think before you define your brand, you have to define your narrative and your story and how you take that to clients.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I will hear from Chrissy in a second, but first I want to pass it over to Alan. What's your perspective on that think back to when you were just starting out as an artist and creating that narrative and creating that brand? What was that like for you?
I think, like Sanj said, it was important for me at the time to just define myself as an artist and to find a spot in the project that I was involved in, and to find a proper role and a proper position in those projects. So at the beginning of my career, I was very, very into trying. I just wanted to give a try to everything. I wanted to top line. I wanted to be able to be a good guitarist, a good backing guitarist, or a good solo guitarist. So just trying a lot of stuff helps defining yourself, I think. So that helped me a lot at the beginning. And I think when I started switching positions, when I started new roles, I had to struggle with the fear of failure, but I think also the fear of rejection. But the most important thing I had to focus on was that that self-determination, that solid determination, that will to be successful in what I was doing in order to be accepted in a band. So that helped me a lot, figuring out how to do the next moves when I dropped live performances. I was like, you know, I'm not getting paid that much for live performances. I'm sure some of you guys know that issue, and I wanted to make a living with my music. So I had to redefine myself a lot of times, and what helped me a lot was that will to be accepted in every position I would take, and to be efficient. Maybe that's a way to answer that question.
Thank you. Chrissy, what role did your personal brand play for you in the beginning of your career?
My personal brand, well, that's quite a story. So back when I grew up in Massachusetts, and I actually did my undergrad at the University of Hartford at the Hart School of Music. When I was there, and even before I went to college, I was kind of one of those kids that was a little bit in the clouds. Like, I never really applied myself. I wasn't really pushed, really. I was intelligent but lazy and kind of a smart aleck, I guess. And I remember I was trying to find something that I could do that kind of brought in my nerdiness on one side, because I love technology and also music. But I knew I didn't want to be a performer. And back when I was in high school, is it me who's feeding back? I can hear it. I'm sorry, I'm such a nerd. I'm like freaking out about the feedback, but I don't know if it's me, and I can move if it is. So yeah, when I was in high school, I actually started working when I was 15. I got a job at Domino's Pizza. I was literally spinning pizzas in the air. I can still do it to this day, I remember. And I got a job at 15 so I could afford to take my first trip out of the country. And I went to London and Paris. That was my plan. And when I got back, I said to my mom, I'm gonna move to London someday. I was 16. She's like, okay, Chrissy, whatever. When I graduated from my undergrad, I actually had gotten a pretty good reputation in my undergrad for being a pretty big Pro Tools nerd and arranger. I loved working with acoustic music and also arranging for like strings and woodwinds I would put into different recordings that I did. And that started to get a lot of notice, at least when I was in the US in my undergrad. However, when I graduated, it was 2008, the recession in the United States. So I said, okay, what am I going to do? And it just so happened that things came together, and I met someone who was a lecturer in the UK and encouraged me to apply for a master's at the University of Westminster in London. And I did, and I got in. And right away I just moved to London with no idea what I was going to do. I just said, I'm just going to do this. I'm out. I'm really doing it. I'm actually moving to London. So when I got there and started doing my MA, I had such an incredible time there. And like I said, for any of you who are music technology people, I was using Pro Tools. When I moved to the UK, I started learning Logic and Logic Pro. And when I got there, I had my first ever remix project, which I failed. And my teacher was like, Chrissy, I know you can do this. Like, you can do this. Just like, you have to apply yourself. He was like pushing me. He's like, I know you can. You've got it in you. This is how you do it. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to do this. So I went after it, and I did a really, really cool remix for my second remix ever. And I started to get really into synthesis, electronic music, and I started to get more into Logic, which was really cool. It was a whole different world that I never really considered for myself, because I had always worked with musicians, you know, not really, I didn't really take that producer role, like making my own content necessarily. I just really liked working with other people's music. That's my thing. But when I graduated from my master's, I was on a student visa still in the UK, waiting for a working visa, and the only place I could get a job was at a coffee shop, because I had to pay my student loans. I had to get a job. So I got a job at Costa Coffee, if anyone knows the UK. I was a barista maestro. I can make latte art. Fun fact. One day I got fired from Costa for being too nice to the customers. I'm not kidding. I was too nice, and they said they thought I was giving away free coffee because I was nice. I'm like, I'm just American, I don't know. So I got fired that day, and the next day I actually got a letter in my email from a venue actually offering a job that I had applied for as a promoter. So I started being a promoter for a venue in London, and that was one of my first kind of steps into the industry there. And once I started working and doing promotion, it wasn't really like my thing. Like I didn't really, I don't know, it wasn't totally for me, but it did kind of help me to do something that was music related instead of something non-music related to make money. Even if it wasn't my favorite thing, I knew that like I wanted to do something that had something to do with audio or music, and that's better than, you know, making coffee. So I was really happy with that. It just happened to work out. I got fired, and like 2 days later, it just came into my inbox. And then from there, I started to sort of branch out once I got my working visa into a freelancer in London. And I realized pretty quickly that my dreams of being a studio engineer and working with other people's music were pretty ridiculous considering the time that I had graduated from my master's, 2009. There weren't a lot of jobs, there wasn't a lot to do, so I was like, okay, I gotta figure this out. When I was doing my master's, one thing I said that I would never do again, because I was really stubborn, was hold a boom pole for live sound. What do you think my first paid job was? I was asked to do location sound for a sports charity, which I'm not a really sporty person either, a sports charity in the UK, and travel all around recording live sound. We worked with the Manchester United Foundation, etc., etc. So I did that because it was better than coffee. Like, okay. And I started to realize that there was a place for me in terms of making money in the industry with my strengths of what I could do, especially working with other artists, producing other artists, and being in the studio in more of a like producer-songwriter role in a way. And that's where I found like that there was money and I could have a career. So I started to do that in the UK. I worked in a bunch of different studios there, East Coast Studios, Rollover Studios, Tin Pan Alley, etc. And I was working with different artists, and while I was doing that, even though I was good at it, I sort of realized that like, that wasn't it either. Like, it wasn't really what I wanted. And so I liked it, it was good, it was fun, and I was using my skill set, but I was like, well, where is like the place for me? Where is it gonna be? And I would say that the big change in my career was when I actually got my first teaching job. I actually come from a family of teachers, and I have always really been into education. I've been volunteering, and I used to mentor and stuff like that. But when I got my first teaching job, I taught one-to-one beat-making lessons at the Uppingham School, which is a public school in the UK, private school, very, lots of money to go there. Beautiful studio. And I started to teach there, and I realized, oh man, like, I love teaching. I love teaching. And it really changed me. And it made me realize that was what I really wanted to do. Like, I wanted to be a teacher. And a lot of people think, oh, you became a teacher because you didn't, I don't know, you failed at something, or like you didn't, but really, it wasn't me. Being in the studio with people who were constantly trying to push me to be somebody that I wasn't, it doesn't fit with my personality. They were trying, because I was a female producer, it was like, especially at that time, 2009, like that wasn't really that forward. You didn't see a lot of female producers who were making beats and like working with artists. That wasn't a thing. So people would try to like promote me in that way. Like they made me, oh gosh, I cringe thinking about it. I was in a music video for an artist I was producing because they wanted to market me as the cool female producer, and I wanted to scream. I never wanted to be a performer ever. But I just felt like I was being pushed to doing things I didn't like. And it wasn't until I really started teaching that I said, okay, I really like this. This is what I like. And I like introducing people to technology and empowering people with technology. And for their own music, it all comes full circle. It's not my music, it's for other people to empower themselves. So that's really where I think it changed for me. And yeah, when I lost my visa, came back to the US, which I didn't want to do. I wanted to stay in the UK forever, actually. But good old immigration law, it's fun. Got back to the US, and then I got my job at Berklee, and haven't looked back since, really. So that was a big change moment for me, I think.
I love that story. Thank you. That is a really relatable story, and I'm also a teacher as well, so I can completely understand what it feels like to just kind of be in the zone and know that you're doing what you really love. Also, latte art and flipping pizzas are great hard skills, so it's a win-win. The next question I want to ask is for everybody. What would you say is a really important attitude or trait to have when you're just starting out in the industry? Maybe it's something that's not as important when you're years in, but something that's super important when you're just starting out.
Well, I think it is as important. The basic thing is that you've always got to be prepared to learn, and always got to be prepared to volunteer to do things, to have new experiences, to gain new experience. Perhaps that doesn't, perhaps as you progress in your career, that tendency to find new things as you get settled into a job, that's less, but it's still a valuable trait. Whatever you're doing, if you're working for yourself, it's how are you going to help your client get to the next stage? You've constantly got to be thinking about it. But I think the attitude is that ability and that willingness, and to communicate to others that willingness to learn, just to have an enthusiasm for what you're doing, for what you're asked to do, and for what you volunteer to do. It'll get you much further than any other trait, in my opinion.
Thank you. Alan, do you have something?
I definitely agree. I think the most important thing is to be able to spend nights and nights and nights on your work, and to be devoted to music, to your passion, or whatever your passion is. You need to be devoted to it, and to not count the hours you spend on it. So I think that's the most important thing. Then you'll be able to learn a lot of stuff that hopefully you will have the opportunity to express later on in your career. So just don't count the hours you're spending on your work, and I promise it will serve you well.
I would like to add, I think the biggest advice I would have loved to have had when I first started out was not to be afraid to fail, because I made so many mistakes when I started off in the music sector, and at the time you think that whatever it is that you're releasing or whatever it is that you're doing will define you, and you shouldn't worry about that definition, because you'll be 20 years in this business, you'll be 40 years in this business, you'll be 60 years in this business, and you'll make so many mistakes, but those mistakes will allow you to, as Iain mentioned, learn and be better than you were. The other piece of advice I would give is to really look outside of the box. So you have your goal. It's, you want to release an album, you want to go on tour, and you need to look at that goal and go, right, this goal is where I want to be. And to get to that goal, there's 100 different steps to get there. And at each one of those steps, there's going to be loads of other opportunities that are going to come to me, and that's going to give me so many more goals. So just be kind to yourself. Don't look at that goal, and if you don't get to that goal, feel that goal is a mistake. Look at that goal and go, right, that's where I'm going to, and there's going to be so many exciting things and challenging things that I'm going to meet along the way, and that will help me.
Thank you. Chrissy?
Yeah, I would say the biggest piece of advice on that, I would say, is to know your worth. And that means know your worth in your self-worth, know your worth in terms of financial worth for what you do. I know there's some of my former students in this group, so anybody who's taken a class with me before probably knows that I'm against unpaid internships. I am fully against them. I feel like a lot of times people feel like they have to still prove themselves even when they're highly educated and very skillful. But if you know your worth and always make sure that you ask for what you deserve, for what your skills are, that also goes back to knowing yourself and what your strengths are. And I think that, in my experience, every time that I've followed myself and who I know myself to be, anytime that I've done that, it's been successful. To really follow for me and knowing who I am and what works for me. And I don't think that you can really go wrong with that. I mean, literally, I said, I was 16 and I said, hey, I am going to move to England. Didn't really think about how I was going to do it, but I said, I'm going to do it. And I did do it. And even my project, like my project in the Dominican Republic, that came out of, I did a trip doing auditions for Berklee, and the musicians were so incredible that it just, I don't even have words, it seeped into me. And I said, I have to help these people. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, though. And I came back and I sent an iMac of mine, that was my old iMac, down with a student in a suitcase to the Dominican Republic so they could have a computer to do some technology. And now we have a fully functional multi-track recording facility there based on donations. I didn't think about how I was going to do it, but I was like, this is what I need to do. I want to do this. I want to record these people. We got to get this music heard. Let's go. And it's just, I followed my heart and I knew what I wanted to do. And I feel like a lot of people now feel like they have to do a lot of things, especially in the music industry. And from a female perspective, I can say that as a person who identifies as female, it's been incredibly difficult for me to face that because I feel like women, I'm just speaking for women because I am, female, identified as female, but at least in my experience, it's been really, really difficult fighting against what maybe other people want for me or trying to get me to do or take advantage of me. And I feel like a lot of people just deal with that in the music industry, thinking that that's okay. And I'm kind of on this other side saying, well, if we all collectively change the culture a little bit by just not accepting things that are not acceptable, I think that can, when people kind of know where they are and what values, they hold dear to themselves, I think that changes the whole collective culture. So for me, I think the biggest thing is to know who you are, know what you want, what is your dream, and how can you always keep that in the front and center of your mind. But really, what is your dream, not someone else's dream for you?
I think that's really good advice. Thank you, Chrissy. So I want to hear from Sanj about what you believe what would you say was the tipping point in your career? We just heard from Chrissy about, she was talking about when she got her first teaching job and how much of a difference that made in her career. What opportunity opened up a bunch of doors for you?
Ooh, I've been very lucky in that there's been lots of kind of doors that have opened. I think obviously the two-pack hologram was a great thing because it kind of showed that the technology that we believed in at the time could do really cool things, and that was a great thing. But before that, I think where things changed for me, I used to work for a music magazine called Music Week, which is like a British trade publication, and they hired me as their digital commercial manager. And what that meant was, at the time, was we don't know anything about digital. We need to know something about digital. Let's hire someone that will handle the website, the mailing list, this, that, like 100 different things. And when I was there, I developed strong relationships with lots of music industry professionals. And they were wonderful people, but none of them really cared about my opinion because I was just a small aspect of a big machine. Things changed for me when I left Music Week and I set up my own business. And I was in my 20s, I was a young lad, and I was saying to the music industry, look, I understand where human behaviour is changing. Let's have a discussion and let me help you. And I think that's when things changed for me, because that's when the people that I used to talk to would look at me and go, well, he was at Music Week, and he was doing that thing, but now he's here and he's doing this fantastic thing. So that was, for me, a big change in my career, definitely.
And how would you say that you prepared yourself leading up to that to really make the most of that point in your career?
Ooh. I'll be honest with you, I had no plan. I had no plan. The first ever tour I did with my band, I was 16. One of us knew how to drive. We had a transit van, and we just literally phoned up rock venues all around Europe and said, look, we're this band, we're from London, book us. We didn't know how much, to ask for money-wise. So when they said to us, "Oh, how much money do you want?" We were like, "Guys, what do we do?" And that has been my life in the music industry from day one. It's not looking at it and going, "How do we do this?" It's going in there and saying, "Let's just do it. Let's just learn. Let's get our hands dirty, and let's see what happens." Now that I'm in my 40s and I have a mortgage and I'm married and I'm about to have kids and all of that kind of stuff, you have to plan. And the great thing about learning from all of the mistakes that you made is that you start to define, you start to mitigate the risks and really try to understand the landscape and go, right, okay, we want to go in this direction. How do we do that? And what are the risks and how do we handle those risks? And so yeah, I think, for the younger people here particularly, I think it's important just to get your hands dirty. Just release that album. If that album, if you don't feel like that album's right, it doesn't matter, just release it. You shouldn't be yearning for perfection. You should be striving for excellence. That's the key. Obviously do it, do a good job, but don't overthink it, just move forward. Just release it, move forward, or do your tour, move forward, just keep going, keep learning.
And I think that really stems from what you were talking about earlier, which is not being afraid and taking advantage of opportunities, because we're always going to feel like we're not ready. We're always going to feel like it's not perfect, but you have to just do it and get your hands dirty.
Yeah, and fear is the mind killer. There's nothing wrong with being scared. There's nothing wrong with going, well, if this doesn't work out, this could ruin me. There's nothing wrong with saying that. But there's a big difference between someone that, thinks about it and someone that doesn't, And usually the people that have done it have been terrified. I still get scared. When you build a holographic system, for example, it's a very dangerous thing. And some of the jobs we do, they take weeks to build these they're like buildings, and someone could die, something could fall and hit someone in the head, and you're known as that guy that killed someone on the holographic. Luckily that's never happened, but you have to kind of look at the risks and plan for them. Anything could happen. Anything, a meteor could hit this city in 30 seconds, What's going to be your last thought? Oh God, I wish I released that record, or I wish I did that, or whatever. Life's too short. You just got to go for it. And we're very lucky to be in this scenario, this institution, doing what we do, doing what we love. All of us here, we're super lucky to do it, and it's only because we can do it and because we do it that we're able to do it.
And it's the perfect place to make those mistakes. Here is the best place to do it. Yeah. Thank you. Iain, can we hear a little bit about the first years of your career, and what would you say, what opportunity or event was the first big shift in your career?
Well, yeah, sure. I've got to echo a lot of what Sanj said about the fact that at the age I started off, it was all fairly random. I really didn't have a plan. I actually trained. I actually went to university and studied international relations at the London School of Economics. So it's quite a long distance away from music. And when I graduated, there was tumbleweed blowing around London, and not a lot to do. So a lot of us gravitated towards the creative industries. I actually went and got myself, literally blagged myself a job as a chef, believe it or not, in one of London's restaurants. But I kept in touch with a lot of the people I'd been at college with, and we all gravitated towards the music scene in London's nightclubs. That was the thing that kept us together. A couple of them, two of them, went out and started managing bands. The first one of my friends rang me up and said, "You've got to give me a hand. I'm going crazy. I've got this band. We signed. We've got a record deal. I need somebody to organise them and get them out on tour." And I went, "Yeah, okay, fine. I'll help you out with that." There was no real plan about it. I met them. There were 10 musicians. There was a band called Blue Ronduella Turk, a splinter of which later became very successful under the name of Matt Bianco in the jazz pop world, fusion world. But at the time, they were a club band playing sort of fusion between Latin music, soul, funk. Great live band. But they were 10 absolute nutcases. I mean, complete nutcases. But it didn't seem to be particularly strange to me because I just enjoyed going out to the same clubs, and my bit was to sort of try and, I wouldn't say keep it together, but try and possibly stop it falling apart completely at the seams every night. The main job was getting them out of the hotel the next morning. I mean, that was the real downside of it. But we went and did a club tour of the UK. They nearly got top of the pops, so they nearly had a hit single in the UK. They started building up the reputation as a great live band. And then we did a second club tour, which I then booked. I actually booked it because they didn't have an agent. The manager really, at this stage, it was, again, a very good friend of mine. He just wanted to deal with the business side of it and not the live side of it. And so I booked this, which gave me a greater control over the environment, because I knew the club owners, I knew the people I was working with, and it started to get a bit together. And we went out and we did a second tour and then a third tour. But by the third tour, it really was obvious that commercially it wasn't going to happen for this particular band. You know, they released 3 singles, and but yet it was so enjoyable. And I came back. I'd been around Britain 3 times. I'd been a couple of times around Europe. We arrived at Bilbao airport to do the carnival there, and we arrived at the airport, and I realised that it was the height of the ETA experiences, and I put the passports on the counter, and there were 8 different nationalities out of 10 people in the band, and it was like they looked at us and said, "Who are you?" You know, like we were a bunch of aliens just landed. Anyway, that was a great show, and we'd gone around Europe. We'd done a couple of European tours, and we got a name for ourselves. And I came back to London thinking, "Oh, I don't really know what I'm going to do now," and I hadn't really planned anything. But I found that I'd made a name for myself as somebody who could handle on the road what to everybody, to me, was just how musicians behaved, or how people worked, or how they, enjoyed themselves. But what everybody else considered was a bunch of very eccentric, well, a bunch of nutters, basically, a bunch of nutcases. And that straight away I got offered another job, working for a band which this time was very successful, commercially successful, which is Spandau Ballet. And it was that ability, that was the kickstart for me, really. The fact that I'd gone and done the job, I got good at it, I learned how to turn myself from a tour manager into a booker of shows, a club booker, and at the same time also started promoting some of the shows in London. And so I'd actually sort of gained this reputation probably without really realising it, just doing what I was enjoying doing, just looking at different aspects of it. And from then, that was it. I didn't look back after that. Because it was the manager of Spandau Ballet had also gone to college with me, and we were also part of that group of friends. You know, we promoted in-house, and within 2 years of me leaving LSE, we were promoting 6 nights at Wembley Arena with Spandau Ballet. But there was no master plan, I can assure you. You know, it was a complete accident in that sense. Yeah, that was the big kick point. Just plugging away at what I enjoyed doing and getting it known that that's what I was good at and that's what I was doing.
And the similarities that I'm hearing between the two stories is, you know, there was no plan, but you made yourself available for opportunity and you were ready for it.
Well, that's absolutely, and that's what I think I said earlier, you know, and I think you've got to just be prepared to learn whatever chance you get, grab any chance you get. I mean, it was, you know, you're never going to, and like Sanj said, don't be afraid of failure, or don't be afraid of going down a blind alley, because you'll learn something on the way down there. You'll learn that you may, if you don't look out for yourself, you may bump your nose against the wall, but you know, you'll have learned something from it, and you'll have learned something from any opportunity, any experience. And I slightly disagree with Chrissy on the point about unpaid internships. I think unpaid internships, certainly with European labour laws, you know, they're the only way that realistically a company like ourselves can give experience to people like yourselves. And we do it, and we've had some great experiences with students from Berklee, you know, helped us with a festival. I remember literally the first 2 years, 2 guys came and helped us in Ibiza. We literally parked them in Ibiza while we put together this festival, and they got on with it, and they had a great time to do it. We fed them, we gave them expenses, we gave them a lot of alcohol, we gave them, you know, and we gave them encouragement, and we showed them what, you know, they showed them how to get on with the job, and they were just fantastic. And you know, I know they enjoyed it, and I'm sure they must have learned a lot from it, from that sort of thing. And it was just taking that experience.
And I think the learning and the experience that you get from it is just an investment in yourself. And even though that first band that you worked with, they weren't commercially successful, it was so valuable to you because you were gaining so much knowledge and experience.
Well, this is it. And what I do agree with Chrissy is you've got to know your own self-worth. But you're investing in yourself. You're the asset. Right? Now, at that particular point in time, if you're taking an unpaid internship to spend a summer in Ibiza, you're not getting a great salary, but you're getting all of this experience. You know, you're not going to. We never expected them to carry on working for nothing, but I'm sure those guys used that as a stepping stone to go on to, well, I know they did actually, because I'm in touch with one of them, and I know that they used that experience as a stepping stone in the same way that I did, maybe, and I did it without really knowing it. It came to me because I was in the right place at the right time. I mean, hands up, I got very lucky in that respect, but you know, it was me that I was investing in. It was me that knew my self-worth. I was paid very little for those club tours that we did, but that's led on to very well-paid work after that.
I think, McKinley, like you touched on the key word there, which is value. You know, you have to kind of look at where the value is, not just for yourself, but in the opportunity. And when you're, you know, if you are interning and, you know, they're not paying you, you need to kind of ask yourself, do they value me? You know, and that's all about negotiation. You know, even when you get to a high level, when you're working with a business or an entity, and you're, you know, working as a partnership or a collaboration or whatever, you have to kind of look at the picture and go, do they value what I'm doing, and do I value what I'm going to get out of this scenario? And it doesn't have to be a money thing. You know, it could be, you know, that you're working with a brand because that brand is going to open doors for you, or you're a music artist and you're collaborating with another music artist and you're doing something on YouTube, and that collaboration is bringing two like a new set of value to, you know, to what it is that you're doing. And that's the key word there. And I get so many emails every day from businesses that want me to do free work. And you know, the way they sell it to me is, you know, if this works out, we'll make millions. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. Do you value what it is that I'm going to do for you? Because it's going to take me, I don't know, 3 weeks to design something for you, or 3 months to build something or develop something. That's the most important thing is the value.
Can I jump in? Because I feel like I opened a can of worms here.
Please do.
Yeah, so a summer in Ibiza with room and board and not expecting them to work for free forever is very different than some of the American internships that we see. For example, you have people that work for years completely unpaid, no food, nothing, like full-time. And that happens. I don't agree with that at all. However, I did come up with this idea. I wish I had something to draw it, but maybe I can explain it. This triangle kind of visual, all right? Top of the triangle is a happy face. One side of the triangle is music note, and the other side is like money symbol, wherever your currency is. And the idea is the top one, the smiley face, is good people, or like a positive, you know, environment. The little music note is for music that you enjoy, music that speaks to you, your music, or money, it's making you money. And what I always say for anybody, to my students, like if you are placed with the, I guess, consideration of working for free or for very little money, that you should at least satisfy 2 out of 3 of those points. So if you do decide to do something for free, because it's natural, I mean, we work with friends, we collaborate, I mean, this happens, it's not, you know, I should be clear, I don't agree, you know, you wouldn't ask the plumber to come into your house and unplug the toilet for the experience. This is what, yeah, I'm just not into that idea, like, oh, come in for the experience, even though you have a master's degree and who knows when you'll get paid. No, I don't like that. However, but if you are going to do free work, this is where this little triangle comes in. You have to have 2 of the 3. So if the money is not there, it has to be good people or good connections, you know, and those 2 come in hand in hand. If it's bad people, I don't think it's a good connection, personally. But good people, good connections, and good music that you enjoy. It has to have those 2. Otherwise, you won't be fulfilled. So I think it's really important, again, knowing your worth with that. If there is no money involved, there is still worth in you for the music that you choose to do, the people that you choose to work with, the network you choose to surround yourself with. That, if you have that in place, free work is all right because you're still being fulfilled.
I completely agree. I think that's a really good way to, you know, make a decision about whether you're going to take on an opportunity. It's that trifecta of what 2 things am I going to get out of this and make it really worth it. Thank you. Let's hear from Alan. Can you tell us a bit about your story, the first few years when you were starting out, and what led up to something that made a huge change in your career?
I think the beginning of my career was a bit odd because I was not planning at all like you guys. I was just a pain in the ass for my parents. I was going out every night, going to close a club promoter. I was going out to practice and to sing with my friends, or just going out for fun. And at some point I realized that maybe it won't be like my brothers, because I got 3 brothers and a sister, and the youngest. So I had kind of the obligation to be as successful in my studies as them. And so it was a lot of pressure, and I just wanted to free myself of that pressure, doing music and going out every night. And some of my friends, they advised me to get on stage and to take my guitar and to go sing in Paris, and it would be good money, and it was not. But it was a very, very great experience because at the age of 17, I had the opportunity to play with very solid bands as a singer, and I think the passion for the live performances were strengthened at that moment because of these people I met. And what's really important, I think for me at the beginning of that career is that those people, because everyone I met just led me to another one, and it kept going on. I kept meeting a lot of people as passionate as me, and with other assets and skills, and I had to learn from them. And I think that led me to at some point to be a bit bored of school, and I dropped university. I was at university learning economics, and I figured out that I would never be a good economist, maybe, because I'm terrible at math, really terrible. So I didn't want to pursue that dream, because it was my parents' dream. It was not my dream. So I dropped the university. I started playing the subways in small bars, in small festivals around France with the band that I was doing at the time. And at some point I realized that the money I was getting from the live performances wouldn't be enough. Would never be enough in my opinion, because sometimes we're 10 on stage and we get paid like 500 euros. So if you make the calculation, it's not enough to make a living or to sustain. So I really I was curious to find another way, and I talked to my parents. They understood my choice, but they were really into the studies, like find another university, find another thing to do. And I listened to them. And I find that digital marketing could be kind of a bridge between my obligation to get a degree, a master's degree, and my dream of working in the music industry. So I prepared the contest for a big university in Paris. I got the contest. I got admitted at that university, and I had to learn a lot of business administration, management, marketing, finance, and I found myself really interested in those stuffs. And all these experiences helped me fit my partners, because I never dropped the studio work I was into. I was going back at the time, back and forth from Dijon, which is located at the east side of France, to Paris, like once or twice a week. And when I came back to Paris, I was working as a digital consultant the day, and every night going to studio sessions with rap artists. And it's exhausting, because these people smoke a lot. And so I had that burnout at some point, because I was working a lot, like 70 hours a week, plus the studio work, and I found myself really, really tired and depressed for no reason, because I was doing what my parents wanted me to do. I got a proper job, and I was able to do to make what I wanted on my free time, but it was not enough. So at some point I just dropped my job. I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, bye. I'm quitting." And I start composing music for myself. And I think one of the big shifts in my career was the day I signed to Universal Music as a composer and songwriter, because this was the first time I could really tell myself, yeah, I'm worth it. I can make a difference, and these people, they know that I have a certain worth on those projects. So I started to be connected with a lot of artists, youngsters and newcomers, and bigger ones in France, especially, and then in other countries in Europe, and then in the US, and they start connecting us with a lot of people, and that fed the young studio that we've built with my partners. and it became a label. We signed our 2 first artists and then 3 composers, and here we are right now.
It sounds like you have a really good global network of artists and people that you work with, and you also had mentioned that in the beginning, it was the people that you were meeting that was kind of leading you to the next project. What did the practice of networking look like for you in the early days? Where were you meeting these people? How were you keeping good connections with them and growing those relationships?
Going out. You need to love beer, maybe. But I think I just met them around gigs, and we're playing, just talking, sharing experiences and sharing about the music, and they just looked nice to me, and I wanted to know them better and to get to work with them. So the first 2 I met them after a concert, a live performance in Paris. And the first one became a songwriter. We had a duet, and we used to write R&B songs, really cheesy one, that I hope will never be out. But it was a good chance to experiment new stuff, and I got into R&B at that moment. I'd never. My sister used to listen a lot of gospel and R&B, and I was like, oh, no. And at that moment, I realized that it's could actually be really good, and it could meet my personal what I like in music and the type of music I'm producing and making. Then I met a video director, and it was just random. Wanted to make a video clip of one of those cheesy R&B songs, and he was young but really connected with some famous rap artists in France, and we started collaborating all together. And he got a studio in his parents' basement, which was not a proper recording studio. It was a video editing space more than a recording studio, and we transformed the place a bit. And I think us gathering around the studio in the basement, and the energies brought by all these people booking recording sessions made me realize that everyone at a certain moment in a studio session can bring something really game-changing for what we're composing. So getting interested in staying curious, I think, is the key. The 2 key I will give to network efficiently, because then you will be able to develop strong relationship based on something that you got really deep inside, what defines you. And if you get to see what defines other people, then maybe you will have the chance to evolve together and to make a difference for each other.
Thank you. I think that's really, really valuable advice and a good story. So at this point, I'm going to open it up for questions. So somebody will be coming around with a microphone. Please let us know if you'd like to ask a question. Nobody has a question? Don't be shy. Yes, in the back.
The tumbleweed.
Just one person's got to start it off. Who's going to be the first one?
So, one thing that I think I'm noticing changing in the music industry is, or I guess in the creator industry, is like I'm seeing a lot more creators taking their taking their like evolution into their own hands. Like there's sites like Patreon, and there's another one called Drip, which I'm not very familiar with, but I think it's like related to Kickstarter. And one thing that I'm thinking about doing is like having my own website, but instead of it just being like a nexus that links all my other accounts, what about, like, do you know of any artists who are actually selling their music or creations on their own, on their website, instead of relying mostly on like streaming services for popularity? And what about like building a fan base, kind of like more grassroots like that?
So it's a very, very important point. I think now more than ever, within this digital sphere that we're in at the moment, and it's still in its infancy, you know, when we think about the digital revolution, it was only 21 years ago, really, technically speaking. There's so many platforms, and all artists now, more than ever, like any art form has been democratized because of digital, whether it's a painting, a picture, a film, or music. The artists that are successful with those platforms are the ones, well, that have two things right. First thing, and it's probably the most important thing in music, in the music industry, is the music. And when I say the music, like whether the music is good, and obviously we can talk about how you perceive good music and bad music, but just generally speaking, artists that have good music, know how to get it out to people, have a big fan base, will do well with these democratic platforms. And then the second thing is you really need to develop a narrative before you jump into this platform. You know, there's Spotify, there's X, there's Y, there's Z. They all do brilliant things, but if no one knows who you are, no one's going to listen to you. One of the best artists of all time, Prince, he used to record music every day with his band. They would go on tour, they would play a gig, and then after the gig, from about 1 a.m. till about, I think it was about like 5 a.m., they used to go into his mobile studio and record stuff, and he used to put his music, when his website was going, he used to put his music on there, and people used to buy it either physically, and then before he passed away, they started to buy it digitally. And the reason why he sold so much stuff was because he was Prince, and his music was incredible. And I think that's the first thing you need to do, is get the music right before you even start thinking about the platform. And the same with the narrative as well. You need a strong narrative before you even start thinking the platform. You know, I'm a technologist, I'm a music technology scientist, technically speaking, but I would never tell one of my clients to use technology for technology's sake. And I think that's the problem at the moment, is there's too much stuff out there, and there's going to be even more, and that's great, but just get the music right, get the narrative right, and then start to explore the platforms. That's what I think.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything to add, maybe from an artist perspective or a manager perspective?
I'd say that Sanj summed the whole matter. I think it's important to be focused on the music first and on your content, because once you get your content, then you can generate like what marketers would call brand awareness. People will start to notice and to know you, and it can be really confusing to start building a platform, and because it's another work. Building a platform and building consistency on your music is two different things, and I think the most important things is to focus on what you do best. Then the platforming and the shaping your platform and including your content is another step that you will have time to focus on. But if you have solid content, people will care about it and will be interested about it. And I think we're very lucky to have all these networks, to have all these socials, because it's then something that you don't have to do. You don't have to care about you don't have to care about building a website on your own if you can just have an Instagram account or whatever. So I think the most important thing is to develop and to build on your content, try to spread it with the means that you have first, and if you get to that point where everyone knows you, then maybe it's interesting to have your own platform, selling merchandising, selling your music and special content that people won't find on the streaming platforms. But it's a huge step to take, and maybe the music should be first.
I think also that you've got to look at the internet and the digital world as a chance to build and communicate, not just through music, but with your fan base. It's a direct line now that artists never used to have, certainly not when I started in the business. They had to go through the press and through the conventional media. What we're finding now is that the artists that are breaking through, by the time they've got to us, they've gone through that period, and they're now getting themselves quite known. But a lot of them have invested a huge amount of time in booking themselves shows, booking themselves going out and making sure that they talk to the audience of those shows, making sure that their website's publicized, just using it, gradually building up a whole fan base through direct work, through live work, and the music. I agree with everything that Sanj and Alan said, is that you've got to get it right. But once you've got it right, it's a further ongoing process of building your own little community.
Can I just add one small thing? Also, don't dismiss the idea of you making money with your music in other ways, not just on selling like physical music copies. Definitely investigate things like getting your music synced into TV or for movies, as well as library music, which is also a really good way to start breaking in and start earning royalties as well with your music. So don't just think about it as like, I'm going to sell this song, but think about other ways to make income from it as well.
Thank you. Is there another question? Over here, maybe? Okay.
Hi, my name is Garvit. I'm from India. And actually, I'm confused. I've always been a believer of planning things and then going forward to the goal. But then, in my recent experiences, I felt like just being in the moment or like chasing opportunities that come as onto your way right now probably might lead to a better result. And after listening to you guys, I mean, like, I don't know, it's just doubtful whether you should like plan properly, or is there like, it's not digital 0 and 1, probably somewhere in the fractions. You know, like, what is the strategy to go about it?
Okay. I like that question a lot. Because I think that when you have a plan in place, you're working toward that goal, and it makes a lot more sense because you have like a linear path. The problem is, I don't think this industry is linear. And that's why I think it's really important, and I think that's why all of us are kind of saying like, okay, well, we looked where we were in the moment and figured out what we could do in that moment, because especially now with technology, everything's changing so fast. My grandfather, who passed away a couple years ago, and he told me throughout my whole life that nothing's forever. You can change always, and you can change your career. You might have a plan in 5 years that's totally different from yours that's right now, and that's great and totally okay. And the beauty about what we do is that we can actually change what we do. We don't have to be stuck in something forever, which is why I think many of us, and I don't want to speak for anybody else, but at least for me, that's why I embrace kind of jumping in the moment and kind of seeing, getting an idea, getting a passion and running with it. And not necessarily having the plan for it, but just running and seeing where it goes. That's been successful for me at least. That's why. So.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is I don't think having no plan is a really good idea. You need to have a plan, but I do find before you get experience, before you've got any experience, or before you've got any intelligence of the sector that you're trying to target, sometimes building a plan can stifle your opportunities. You know, you've got this plan, you're delivering it. What happens if it doesn't work? Or what if the results you wanted aren't on the table? There might be some other results. Planning is good, but don't let it dictate the direction you're going into, particularly within the art space. So when I say art, I mean anything where you're being expressive. A couple of examples. The first ever, what was before X Factor? What was the name of that show that Simon?
American Idol?
So Pop Idol.
Oh,
Pop Idol. So when Pop Idol launched, the people that were in charge of the platform assumed that whoever would win Pop Idol would appeal to a younger demographic and sell loads of records to that younger market and make loads of money, etc., etc. And what happened was you had two artists that were number one. It was Will Young and another chap called Gareth Gates.
Gates.
Yeah, Gareth Gates, right? And these were like youngish, good-looking lads. And the assumption was, the plan was that they're going to sell loads of records to young people. And they didn't. They sold loads of records, but it was to old women, grands. And these people that had made this plan had kind of prepared themselves to go in one direction, but what they found out was, actually, we need to go in this direction to capitalise on this opportunity. Yeah, it might not be what we thought. Yeah, it might not be desirable. I mean, I love old women, I love old people, I think they're awesome. But from a Sony point of view, because it was Sony that kind of paid for everything, they were like, oh, we need to change our plan. But it was only through executing that plan, it was the first time they'd ever done anything like this before, that they learned something, that they gathered intelligence, and they went, you know what, we're going to go in this direction. And that's the key when we're talking about getting our hands dirty. It's about learning, it's about gathering that intelligence and defining your plan and being prepared to go in other directions and be successful in those other directions. When I did the Tupac hologram, I'll be honest with you, like, I'm a big hip-hop fan. I love Tupac, I love Dr. Dre. I didn't realise just how culturally relevant that initiative was going to be. We had a plan, we were like, right, we're going to launch it, it's going to do this, it's going to be brilliant. But it took us in a completely different direction. And it allowed me to work with fashion brands all over the world, China, America, India. And that's what I think we're trying to kind of allude to is you know, have an idea, but until you gain that experience, your plan is not going to define you. It's what you do that defines you.
It's like there's a difference between a plan and a goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, have a goal in mind, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a linear plan to get to that goal.
Yeah, learn to spot the opportunities as well. That's the thing. I mean, don't close your mind to anything that comes along, even if it doesn't fit in with the plan or the strategy. I mean, opportunities will take you in a number of different directions, but without them, you know, it's nice to have a linear progression, but you're probably in the wrong industry for it.
That's the wicked thing about the music sector particularly, is it's just chaos. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen. I remember meeting a guy who was head of A&R for one of the labels that got bought up by Universal, and he was he was known as the guy that didn't sign Coldplay, right? He was known as that guy, and it was because he was at the top of a food chain or a system that was going in a certain direction, and he looked at Coldplay and was like, they're not going to make any money. Coldplay are one of the biggest bands in the world. Iain, when you started, you didn't know that Spandau Ballet were going to be like one of the biggest 80s pop stars.
No, not at all. And I mean, apart from Spandau Ballet, I also another friend of mine from the same college, I used to go and pick him up I had a car by then, and take him to football to go and watch. Again, I used to hear his girlfriend singing in the squat that they both shared. It was above a fire station. And again, 18 months later, I was booking her first world tour. She was called Sade. So that was, that was another opportunity, and that was something else. I used to think your girlfriend sings quite well. I mean, I wish I'd have taken the opportunity and managed her. But as it was, I was close enough to be her agent and to book her first couple of world tours, which was great.
Alan, do you have anything to add about, the difference between a plan and having a goal?
I think the most important, we all need a goal, because as Sanj said, it's just chaos in the music industry. No plan is meant to be, successful. There's always something happening that forces you to reevaluate your chances and reevaluate your opportunities and redesign your path. So don't stick to a plan, but to a goal. For example, when I burned out, and I really wanted to get into my music. I knew a singer, a jazz singer. She's beautiful and has a beautiful voice, and I just wanted to help her sell records, because I knew that we had a structure to help her, and I wanted to make a difference with a certain type of music. And I was not aware that jazz music is not that streamable, because it's not listened by young people. And I had that idea in mind. It was my plan for 2018. And in April 2018, something like this, I met another singer. I was not at all into her music, just Caribbean music. And I was not that, I didn't want to make that project and to compose for her. Her name is Iain, and we just produced like half of her album. We got triple platinum, diamond, and I'm seen now as an Afro music producer, and I wanted to be a jazz producer or a soul producer. So you don't need a plan, you need a goal, and I think Aya helped me achieving one of my goals, which was to get some such certifications. Because if you're certified as a producer, then you start your brain start getting strong, and you get stronger with the certification and with the people in the industry professional acknowledging that you're actually good at what you're doing. So if I had a plan that I didn't want to break, maybe this opportunity I wouldn't have taken.
Thank you. Well, we are just about at the end of our time here, so I want to thank all of the panelists on stage for sharing all of this value and insight. Can we please give them a round of applause?